Hi, I'm Chris Conway, Associate Professor of Modern Languages and Faculty Co-Chair of the UTA Arlington OneBook Program. My presentation is about the first chapter of Bill McKibben's Deep Economy. It's called After Growth. And what I want to do is sketch out some of the aspects of this chapter to help you get into it and hopefully explore it in a deeper way. One of the tricks that I like to use when I'm reading a book for the first time and trying to figure out what the author is saying is to think about the title of the book or the title of a chapter that I'm reading. In this case, the chapter that I'm discussing is called After Growth. And this title is significant because what McKibben wants to explore is what happens after we wean ourselves off of this obsession with always expanding and always growing the economy. And so his chapter is called After Growth because he's thinking about what comes after this nearly 200-year obsession with endlessly growing the economy and endlessly being addicted to fossil fuels. So the title tips us off to what is going on in this chapter. Now, he begins the chapter by talking about two inventions that he considers key to our present globalized economy and our globalized predicament in terms of energy resources. And one is a machine. It is an actual object. It is a material thing that was invented in the 18th century. And the other thing is not an object, not a thing in of itself, but an idea. Now, what is the machine that he refers to in this first chapter? It is the invention of the steam engine by Thomas Newcomen at the end of the 18th century. Now, the other invention is the conceptual one. It's the idea. And it's the idea of growth, the idea that economies can limitlessly and forever expand and expand and expand, and there are no boundaries, and there's no stopping the growth that is possible for an economy. So he talks about these two inventions as being central to leading us to a crisis that has to do with energy and with our very survival on the planet. Now, he talks about three problems in this chapter that have to do with this crisis. Okay? The first problem is political. It has to do with the fact that the more we grow economies, the more the globalized economy expands, the more inequality or injustice exists in the world. This is a bit strange, you would think, and we are trained to expect by our culture, our political culture, that the more economies grow, the more equality exists. Now, McKibben argues for something different. He says, and he brings a lot of information to bear to prove that the more economies grow, the more disparities between rich and poor grow. Okay? Now that's one of the crises that he talks about in his in this first chapter. The second crisis is scientific. It has to do with the actual material resources of our planet and how those material resources are being depleted and how pollution is affecting the quality of our life. Now he calls this a scientific issue because obviously we use science to measure these changes in our world, in our ecosystem. Okay. Now, the third problem that he identifies in terms of this crisis of our planet in this moment in terms of sustainability is a psychological or sociological crisis, and it has to do with the fact that excess consumerism, excess materialism does not lead to happiness, contrary to how we feel about desiring that flat screen TV, thinking that that flat screen TV is going to make us happy. He says that's not true. He says that there are studies that show that the more people consume in terms of just material objects and luxury goods, that those purchases really don't have an effect on our overall happiness. If anything, they work against our happiness, or they are a detriment to our feelings of joy in the world. So these are the three issues that he identifies as a part of this crisis that we're living in the moment in this first chapter. One of them has to do with inequality, and he calls this a political issue. The other one has to do with material resources, natural resources, and the environment. And he uses the term scientific because he's talking about the different ways we have of measuring this crisis. And then finally, this issue of happiness, or how we feel, this psychological and sociological issue that is very much connected to the issue of sustainability, consumerism, and the environment.